The oyster shell recycling program was launched in Louisiana to slow coastal land loss. Over 2,000 volunteers collect oyster shells from New Orleans area restaurants to restore reefs, and over 8,000 feet of shoreline has been protected since 2014. In the meantime, Colchester Borough Council and the University of Essex are working together to tackle climate change. They launched the Building with Nature research project, which aims to reuse oyster shells to improve coastal defense in the local region.
The idea is, or what we are trying to explore in our recent project, is how can we use the Pacific rock oyster, or is it a possibility that we can use Pacific rock oyster to build oyster reefs, which would then build natural sea defenses, rather than investing heavily into hard engineered, man-made structures, concrete structures, sea walls, which are very costly and have a limited lifespan as well. These sea walls, they have to be maintained and they do not last forever. They do not adapt to the rising sea level, basically. Whereas natural reefs, they, once they're damaged in a winter storm, for example, they would naturally rebuild. It would take some time, of course, for this rebuilding to happen. But once there is some reef structure, there's a hard substrate available. That's always a great place where young oysters, oyster larvae can settle down onto and then rebuild this natural reef. So sea levels are rising, we know that. We know that particularly this part of the country is substantially more affected than other parts, because this part of the country actively sinks into the sea as well, which adds to the sea level rise that we get from the melting of glaciers and changes in the water cycle. And about 100, 200 years ago, much of the coastline here was protected from natural oyster reefs. But these populations of oysters, they have been overfished. The native oyster, they are locally extinct in some places. And as a result, we've lost these natural oyster reefs. And as I said, the oyster reefs, they change the topography of the seabed. They increase the shear stress that the water experiences, basically, so that the waves are slowing down when they roll towards the coast, and that takes the energy away, because the roughness of the surface of the seabed is changed due to the presence of the oysters. But it's not just the physical factor, there are also all the biological factors, such an increase in biodiversity. So once you have a bit more physical structure than just a plain mud flat, you provide large opportunity for other species, other organisms to settle in that area and use them. Oyster larvae are being released into the environment by the parents, and they sort of drift with the tides and are being dispersed into the environment as a result of that. And at some point in the life stage, they develop an eye spot, so they can sense light, and they swim away from the light down to the seabed. And they also develop a foot that they use to taste the surface with. So they basically bump onto the seabed and they taste that surface, and if it tastes of wood, they say, no, this is not where I want to settle down necessarily. If it tastes of plastic, they do not want to settle down there. But if it tastes of oyster shell, they know, because there are the oyster shells there, this is a good place for me to settle down onto. Once an oyster larvae has made that decision to settle down, it will never be able to move from that spot again, because it cements itself into place, and it will have to have a high chance of survival. And to build with nature, we can use very similar approaches. So what we've done as part of our project is we looked at the possibility that we could recycle oyster shell material, and we find that in comparison to the United States, is probably a bit more challenging, because many of the oysters that are being grown here along the Essex coast are then distributed to various fish markets. So they go to London Fish Market, to Birmingham, Manchester fish markets, large cities, and then they are distributed all across the country from there. The oyster fishermen themselves, they do not feel that they have either the time or the means to really then go around and collect all that material again, because it's so distributed. However, we can still think about how can we soft engineer rather than hard engineer. How can we soft engineer coastal defenses? Can we potentially buy shell in relatively cheaply or use a gravel material to put it down the seabed at the right time in order to attract the larvae. If the larvae do not find a substrate that tastes of oyster at the right time, they will still have to settle down. They will settle down on any hard substrate, so it doesn't have to be shell material, but shell material is the best, of course. As human beings, we have to make a decision what sort of environment we want to have. Do we want to cherish and keep this biodiversity, or are we happy with things disappearing? But again, these things disappearing may have then detrimental effects on us. Luckily, there are very good positive choices to make, but it has to happen. People have to be disciplined and see this through. As I said earlier, you cannot be impatient and think that some magic thing is going to happen. We have these opportunities to change things for the better, and we should do it.